that the people can rely on what they're doing. Because honestly, and Larry can speak up, I don't think they qualify under the IRS rules today, but I don't know what it'll be tomorrow.
Right, but they just need clarity.
They need clarity.
Bottom line, because then you
One
don't
way or the
file.
other.
They just need to know. Thank you, Mr. Harris.
If that's a hypothetical, they don't qualify.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for being with us today. I appreciate it. I first wanted to share a quote from a restaurant owner in my district about the impact of the ERTC on his business during COVID. Parker Scholander, who owns a restaurant in Bellevue, stated that his business, quote, relied on the ERTC to keep the lights on and our workers on payroll. While ERTC refunds took almost a year for many restaurant operators to receive, it was incredibly important to help sustain operators during mandatory shutdown orders and pandemic-related challenges, end quote. So while the ERTC provided many small businesses with necessary resources to keep their businesses running and employees on payroll throughout the pandemic, we know that many experienced significant delays and attempts to defraud them, as has been discussed. This is a clear example of why we need to make sure that the IRS also has the resources to effectively combat potential fraud and abuse and ensure timely processes of refunds. They can't do it if they don't have people and resources. I wanted to start with you, Mr. Harris. In your experience, can you describe how fraudulent applications impact small businesses that unknowingly worked with ERTC mills?
Well, it will eventually, if they are subject to an audit, it could ruin them, because by the time the IRS comes in and makes the determination that they weren't qualified, this huge sum of money that's probably being infused back into the business is no longer sitting in the checking account, and yet the solution is you have to pay that back, and most likely with penalties and interest. So, I mean, the joy of getting the money could very quickly be replaced with the terrifying reality that because you weren't eligible, you could be put out of business because of the amount of money you now owe back to the federal government.
If I might add to that, that example of that non-for-profit person yesterday realizing she had been, hooked, crook, whatever, and she wants to pay it back. Don't let that interest and penalty run. Have that amnesty. Have a process of how to come clean. The other thing, if she'd have got that, if at the time it was filed, if she'd had provide documentation on qualifying on that 941X, maybe the money would have never went out and saved that business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Zippo, can you describe how additional resources for ERTC education and outreach would have helped nonprofits and small businesses that were seeking relief?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is they be aware of the program. Secondly, we still hear from nonprofits that think that because they got PPP, they're not eligible for the ERTC. Of course, that was the case at the beginning, but then it was changed. More clarity with respect to what those eligibility requirements are, what it means to have reduction in gross receipts, all of that. The more information they have at the outset that's clear, then they're more equipped to apply and get the relief that they need sooner. There's no question that education is absolutely key to this process, and it will help to stave off all of the bad actors that we've been talking about.
And just follow up to that, does the IRS's focus on increased ERTC auditing disproportionately impact some businesses like disadvantaged or minority-owned small businesses?
It could. I mean, part of the issue is there are some organizations that, because of the complexity, were perhaps shut out of the process or less inclined to apply because they didn't have the resources to hire a reputable accountant, or they just didn't have the bandwidth to look into the complexity of the rules. So, having, and of course the fear of an IRS audit, or there's certain organizations that may deal with constituencies that may be a little bit more reluctant to apply. Again, it goes back to making sure that there's good education and that the program is structured so that maximum access is allowed for organizations at the grassroots, at the rural level, organizations serving marginalized constituencies, and a lot of other folks that might be shut out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the chairman for holding this hearing. The volume of cases